In today's story, we confront a chilling case that blurs the line between fantasy and horror. For most people, fear is something to avoid, but not for Cassandra and her twin brother, Rob. From early childhood, they reveled in the thrill of the terrifying. Night after night, they would sit in the dark, spinning scary stories just to rattle each other's nerves. Rob prided himself on his imagination, telling tales meant to provoke screams, while Cassandra, ever the willing audience, would shriek on cue. Their bond was built on goosebumps and adrenaline, and their imaginations were fueled by episodes of Scooby-Doo and books about monsters and ghosts. Even in childhood debates over which character was secretly a vampire or ghost in disguise, Cassandra's instincts were often sharper than Rob's. Though their mother, Mary Smith, didn't share their fascination with the macabre, she nurtured their love of reading by giving them horror fiction by Robert Wall. What started as a childhood interest grew into a lifelong obsession. As teenagers and adults, Cassandra and Rob collected villain-themed figurines, watched horror films together, and even dreamed of opening a store dedicated entirely to the culture of fear. Cassandra's passion eventually brought her closer to the industry. In 2004, she landed a small part in a horror film, hardly a blockbuster, but enough to leave her twin brother green with envy. Rob begged her to use her connections to help him get a role. "I'm ready to play anyone," he told her, hopeful. Cassandra replied with a smile and a hint of caution. She had gotten her role by sheer luck. The casting director of that film was Colin Dudley. On set, there was an undeniable tension between him and Cassandra, though neither dared to act on it. That changed at a Halloween party. Cassandra came dressed as Velma, her favorite Scooby-Doo character. Colin showed up as Alex from A Clockwork Orange, unervingly in character. He walked around sipping milk, quoting dark lines from the novel, including one that unsettled many but seemed to captivate Cassandra. "Beauty invariably caused my only desire, to destroy it, for it did not fit at all into our ugly world." Cassandra mistook the statement for a dark compliment. What followed was a brief romance that fizzled out quickly. Colin soon left her for another actress named Rebecca, and the two eventually moved in together. Then came the day that changed everything. On August 25, 2020, Cassandra Cannell disappeared. Without leaving a note or telling anyone where she was going, she simply drove off into the unknown. Her phone went unanswered. Her mother was frantic. Mary Smith pleaded with the police to take action, but they dismissed her concerns. "Adults go out all the time without telling their parents," they said. But Mary knew her daughter. Cassandra wouldn't just vanish without a word. She begged the officers to start searching immediately, believing every hour could mean the difference between life and death. 2 agonizing days passed before the authorities finally initiated a search. On the 3rd day, Cassandra's vehicle was located under a bridge in a desolate part of town, an area known for its homeless population and a reputation for violence. The car doors were unlocked, and the keys were still inside. Something was wrong. Cassandra had no reason to be in that neighborhood. Police canvassed the area, speaking with transient residents who were hesitant to cooperate and quick to disappear at the sight of a badge. But despite the effort, no one claimed to have seen Cassandra, and no one had any clue how or when the car arrived there. The unsettling nature of Cassandra's disappearance struck fear into the community. Questions multiplied by the hour. How could a woman with no history of erratic behavior simply vanish? Why was her car found abandoned in such a dangerous place, untouched and wide open? It was as if she had stepped into the void. Her friends and family clung to hope, but with every passing day, the possibility of her safe return grew slimmer. The air around the investigation turned cold, mirroring the way leads began to dry up. Still, Mary Smith refused to let her daughter's case be forgotten. Behind the scenes, Rob found himself haunted by more than just his favorite childhood horror stories. Guilt crept in. He hadn't spoken to Cassandra the day she vanished. What if she had tried to call him first? What if he had missed a sign, a message, a clue hidden in plain sight? The stories they used to tell in the dark were never meant to come true. But now, Rob was living a nightmare he couldn't wake from, and no amount of imagining would bring his sister back. As the investigation dragged on, the police began to consider whether someone Cassandra once trusted could be involved. They retraced her steps, questioned acquaintances from the film set, and took a closer look at her relationships. The lens quickly turned toward Colin Dudley, the Halloween party, the cryptic quote, the breakup. Did it mean anything, or was it all just coincidence? Investigators couldn't say for sure, but Mary had her suspicions. And in cases like this, a mother's intuition is often more powerful than any forensic tool. The detectives canvassing the scene beneath the bridge didn't expect much. The area was notorious, a haven for transients, addicts, and drifters. Most people living there spent their days drinking and avoiding attention. Questioning them produced little more than mumbled answers and quick getaways. The officer in charge of Cassandra's case requested her phone records, though his instincts told him it would be another dead end. As he predicted, the trace led them straight to the nearby river. The signal had gone silent in the water, making any chance of tracking it nearly impossible. Still, they had to try. A dive team was dispatched, hoping against hope to find something, anything. The divers stood at the shoreline, tossing rocks into the water, gauging how far a phone could have been thrown. Cassandra's mother mentioned something small but significant. The phone case was decorated with rhinestones, making it easier to spot beneath the water. It wasn't long before the divers located it, but it brought no relief. There was no sign of Cassandra's body. To the police, this was hopeful. No body meant she might still be alive. But for Mary Smith, it offered no comfort. In her heart, she had already accepted the worst. She only wanted closure, to find her daughter's body, and to give her a proper goodbye. I was waiting for my granddaughter, Mary said softly. I wanted to be a grandmother. I even bought a crib. It's just sitting in the garage. What am I supposed to do with it now? That offhand comment struck a chord with investigators. Cassandra had been pregnant, and statistically, crimes against pregnant women are often committed by the father of the child. But Cassandra hadn't told anyone who the father was. She wasn't married, and to her mother's knowledge, she hadn't been dating anyone. The pregnancy had been a mystery until now. Mary recalled that her daughter frequently texted and called someone, yet strangely, the number wasn't saved in her contacts. And while Mary couldn't remember the digits, she found it odd that Cassandra spoke so often with someone whose number she never recorded. It didn't make sense. Women, especially those in difficult or emotional relationships, usually confide in at least one friend. Surely someone knew more. Eventually, police found that someone, a close friend who revealed Cassandra's secret. She had reconnected with her old flame, Colin Dudley. Their romance had been short-lived in 2004, yet somehow, after 15 years, they had found each other again. It was Colin who reached out first. In 2014, he messaged Cassandra on Facebook. His father had passed away, and he needed someone to talk to. His wife Rebecca, he explained, had a strained relationship with his father, leaving him isolated in his grief. Cassandra, feeling compassion for an old friend, agreed to meet. One conversation turned into many. Their bond rekindled quietly and secretly. From that point on, Colin lived two lives. He remained committed to his wife on the surface, while Cassandra became the other woman, the hidden one. And when she discovered she was pregnant, she couldn't bring herself to tell him. She remembered a moment, sharp and painful, when Colin declared he never wanted children. In fact, he had expressed relief that Rebecca was infertile. That chilling confession echoed in Cassandra's mind every time she thought of telling him. The truth, she feared, would shatter his carefully constructed life. She chose silence, but as her belly grew, it became harder to hide. She wore oversized sweaters and avoided him. Eventually, she stopped seeing him altogether, but the decision tormented her. If she claimed the baby belonged to someone else, it would raise suspicions. If she told the truth, it could cause everything to collapse. Cassandra was caught in a tightening noose of secrets. The fear of judgment, of rejection, of causing pain. It consumed her. The world she had once controlled with stories and imagination now held her hostage. And all the while, she bore her burden in solitude, trying to protect the man she loved and the child she carried. Her withdrawal from Colin wasn't fueled by anger, but by sacrifice. She thought she was doing the right thing, but secrets have a way of unraveling. And in Cassandra's case, the consequences were far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. For the detectives, Colin Dudley now emerged as more than a figure from the past. He was a person of interest. His history with Cassandra, the rekindled relationship, his disdain for fatherhood, all painted a troubling picture. Could the charming casting director, once enamored by the horror genre, have stepped beyond the fiction he admired and into something far more sinister? Investigators began to retrace every interaction, every call, every visit, in search of a crack that might expose the truth. As Cassandra's story unfolded, one chilling realization began to solidify. This was no random disappearance. This was something darker, calculated, personal, and perhaps premeditated. The horror that she and her brother once sought in books and movies had found its way into real life. And it was no longer just a story. It was a crime waiting to be solved. Cassandra had reached a breaking point. The weight of the secret she had carried for months could no longer be borne in silence. Choosing truth over deception, she finally called Colin and told him the news. She was pregnant, and the child was his. There was a pause, long, cold, and uncertain. Then, surprisingly, Colin responded. He said he was delighted. Something in his tone, however, felt off. It didn't sound like genuine joy. It was too controlled, too measured. But Cassandra, exhausted and emotionally drained, wanted to believe him. She took his words at face value, hoping this might be a turning point for them. Detectives, meanwhile, continued to follow the trail. One of them arrived at Colin Dudley's home. When he knocked on the door, it was Colin's wife, Rebecca, who answered. Out of respect and discretion, the officer didn't immediately mention Cassandra or her disappearance. Instead, he introduced himself simply as an old friend of Colin's. Dudley appeared almost instantly, shutting the door quickly behind him and walking with the detective down the street. He hadn't even waited for the officer to present credentials. It was almost as if he had been expecting this moment. "Thank you for not saying anything in front of Rebecca," he said flatly. "That was decent. You're a real officer. My compliments." Colin kept his answers short and sharp. "I heard Cassandra's missing. Weird. Bloody weird. I don't even know where she could have gone. She told me she'd had a big fight with her brother. Was upset. I told her she should make peace with him. Not sure if she listened." The detective already knew about the argument. Rob had mentioned it. It wasn't a serious dispute, just a sibling misunderstanding. Still, it left Rob filled with guilt. Cassandra had called him the day she disappeared, hoping to come over and talk. But Rob, hurt and prideful, turned her down. Now, he believed that choice had cost him everything. Colin, meanwhile, offered something of a confession. Not a criminal one, but a moral reckoning. "I'm not proud of what I did," he said. "Dating an ex behind my wife's back for 5 years. Yeah, I'll pay for that in the next world. But love doesn't follow rules. In 2014, my father died. He hated Rebecca, hated her with every fiber of his being. But he adored Cassandra, always asked about her, told me I was a fool for letting her go. We argue with our parents, thinking they don't get it, but then you realize, maybe they were right all along. After he died, I just wanted to do something that would have made him happy. That's when I got back in touch with Cassandra." He spoke of the double life he'd led, of the lies he'd told to keep the affair hidden. "I bought a fishing rod," he said, eyes tired. "I hate fishing, but I needed the cover. I'd tell Rebecca I was on a trip or by the lake, then go to Cassandra's. On the way back, I'd stop and buy fish so it looked real. She'd cook it, I'd choke it down. I did that for years." Then came the moment of confrontation. The detective asked him directly, "Did you know Cassandra was pregnant?" Colin's face shifted. "Pregnant? By whom?" The detective said the child was likely his, according to Cassandra's close friend. Colin shook his head in disbelief. "That can't be. She was avoiding me. I thought she'd found someone else. Can't blame her. She wanted a real family. Something I couldn't give her." When asked about the last time he'd seen Cassandra, he hesitated. 3, maybe 4 months ago. Last real meeting. Unless you count the time we crossed paths at a mall. My wife was in the fitting room. I got bored and wandered to the cafe. Saw Cassandra, just for a second. Then came the question no detective ever wants to answer, but always hears. Do you think there's a chance she's still alive? Colin asked. The officer replied with calm conviction. We're doing everything we can. Believe me, but this wouldn't be the last time they would speak. Cassandra's phone, recovered from the depths of the river, was waterlogged beyond repair. Yet all was not lost. The police pivoted. They submitted a request for the phone's metadata, call logs, texts, geolocation pings. It would take time, but even without the physical device, they hoped to extract a map of her final days. Every call, every message, every second would be examined. Detectives suspected that Cassandra's sudden disappearance was anything but random. It carried signs of planning, of intention. Whether it was a desperate attempt to escape or something far worse, they couldn't say. But they knew one thing. The closer they looked at Colin Dudley, the less he resembled the grieving ex-lover, and the more he began to look like a man cornered by a secret he couldn't control. In the weeks following that meeting, the investigation widened. Detectives began interviewing people from Cassandra's work, her inner circle, her neighbors, anyone who might have seen or heard something unusual in the days before she vanished. The pressure to find answers weighed heavily on the team, especially as Mary Smith continued to press for action, for justice, for closure. And though the city moved on and headlines faded, the detectives didn't forget. In the cold halls of the precinct, Cassandra's case file remained open, marked with red tabs and handwritten notes. Each officer knew that somewhere out there, the truth waited silent, buried, waiting to be uncovered. The investigation took a dramatic turn when detectives analyzed Cassandra's phone records. The unsaved number her mother had spoken of, the one Cassandra frequently called, was confirmed to belong to Colin Dudley. He had been in regular contact with her, including on the very day she vanished. This discovery further deepened suspicions, but it wasn't the only break in the case. That same day, police received surveillance footage from the train station near where Cassandra's abandoned vehicle had been found. On it, a man stood out from the crowd. He was concealed, almost theatrically, beneath a long cloak, gloves, a scarf wrapped around his face, and a hat with wide brims that obscured his eyes. The man's identity was impossible to determine from the footage alone, but there was something in his gait, a familiarity in the way he moved. The lead detective felt an eerie certainty. It resembled Colin Dudley. And then there was the hat, a nearly perfect match to the one worn by the character Alex from A Clockwork Orange, a costume Colin had once donned years ago. Investigators followed the disguised figure through the station's cameras. He entered a cafe for only a few minutes, then exited and walked calmly to the parking lot. There, he entered a vehicle and drove away. He never once revealed his face, but police captured the license plate. It was registered to Colin Dudley. Armed with this crucial detail, authorities secured a search warrant and dispatched a team to Colin's residence. There was a glimmer of hope that Cassandra might still be alive, possibly held in the basement. At first glance, the home yielded no signs of foul play, but inside the closet, detectives discovered the very same hat seen in the surveillance footage. In the basement, Cassandra was nowhere to be found. No body, no clear signs of a crime. Yet something set off alarms. The department's trained K-9 unit barked aggressively when sniffing around the couch. The scent of blood, though no longer visible, lingered in the fabric. It was a troubling sign. Colin, calm but defensive, continued to insist on his innocence. "You've got no proof," he told them. "No body, no motive. You're trying to bury a man just because you don't have a better suspect." His wife, Rebecca, was interviewed separately. Stunned, betrayed, and overwhelmed, she struggled to process the double life her husband had been leading for years. When asked plainly whether she thought Colin was capable of murder, she paused for a long time before answering. "No," she finally said. "He's selfish. He's secretive. But he's not a killer." Unfortunately, her opinion wasn't enough. And as strong as the circumstantial evidence was, it still wasn't sufficient to arrest him. Mary and Rob Smith were furious, demanding justice. But the detective could only shrug in frustration. The law required more than suspicion. Colin was brought in for further questioning. This time, investigators had new details to press him with. On the morning of August 25th, at 6:30 a.m., Colin had visited a hardware store. He bought cleaning supplies, chemicals, gloves, and heavy-duty trash bags. Store cameras confirmed the purchase. The bags alone raised red flags. Later that morning, Cassandra had texted him to say she was on her way to his house. Colin received the message and then immediately deleted it. But digital traces remain, and police retrieved the message from the service provider's logs. For several hours that morning, both of their phones remained at Colin's residence, suggesting they were together. Then, Colin powered his phone off. What he failed to realize, however, was that Cassandra's phone remained active. Investigators used it to map his every movement. From his house, he went to the train station, the one where the disguised man was spotted. There, they believe he cleaned himself up in the cafe bathroom. Then, using the same vehicle caught on camera, he drove to the pond where Cassandra's phone signal eventually died. This action was deliberate. He wanted to destroy the evidence but made a critical mistake. To solidify the timeline, officers seized the GPS device from Colin's car. The data matched Cassandra's phone movements exactly. But then, a new pattern emerged, one that hadn't been noticed before. The following day, the GPS showed that Colin had driven through a wooded area. Curious, the detectives retraced the route. Deep in a ravine, hidden among the trees, they found it. A large industrial trash container bound tightly with ropes. Blood stained the earth around it. The smell was unmistakable. There was no doubt what was inside. The container marked the end of a trail that had begun with whispers and secrets and now screamed with evidence. The woods stood silent as officers opened the lid, but what they discovered was enough to turn suspicion into certainty. Colin Dudley's double life had finally unraveled, and his past had come back, not as a costume or a quote, but as a brutal reality that could no longer be hidden behind a scarf or shadow. That discovery brought a grim resolution to the case. Mary Smith's nightmare had been realized, and Rob's guilt was cemented. The woman they had hoped to find alive had been betrayed by someone she once trusted, someone who had claimed to love her. The horror story Cassandra had grown up fascinated by had, in the cruelest of turns, become her own. And now justice was no longer a hope. It was a mission. The detectives returned to the precinct with evidence not only physical but overwhelming. The rope, the container, the blood, the route, the surveillance footage, the text message, each piece a voice in a chorus of undeniable truth. Now the system would move forward. Charges would be filed. And Cassandra Connell's name would be remembered not just as a victim, but as a life stolen by the very fiction she once embraced. It had been a month since Cassandra's murder when investigators finally confirmed the grim truth. The body, left to decay and exposed to the elements, was difficult to identify. But one small detail helped them: her tattoo. It had been noted in her missing persons file, and it matched exactly. With that, the last sliver of hope was extinguished. That same day, Colin Dudley was taken into custody and formally charged with murder. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community, but for Mary Smith and her son Rob, it was the beginning of a different kind of agony, the long road toward justice. Forensic experts launched a detailed investigation. The autopsy revealed the cause of death: a fractured skull, consistent with blunt force trauma. Cassandra had been struck hard, violently and fatally. Back at the Dudley residence, investigators scoured the basement once more. Despite Colin's efforts to clean the scene, traces of blood remained, embedded in the floorboards and soaked into the furniture. There was no doubt the crime had taken place there. Meanwhile, Rebecca, Colin's wife, was questioned again. She confirmed she had spent the entire day in a different wing of the house, one where sounds from the basement would not have carried. She had been completely unaware. More importantly, she exposed a lie. Colin's repeated claims that his wife was infertile had never been true. It had all been a fabrication, another piece in his twisted web of deception. The motive became clear. Colin didn't want children. Cassandra's pregnancy had shattered the illusion of control he had maintained for years. Instead of facing the consequences, he chose to end her life, coldly, permanently. As the case went to trial, prosecutors faced a frustrating challenge. While circumstantial evidence abounded, motive, opportunity, digital trails, there was no murder weapon, no eyewitnesses. It wasn't enough for a guaranteed conviction in the eyes of the jury. To ensure he couldn't walk free, the court offered Colin a plea deal. In exchange for admitting guilt, he would receive a reduced sentence. Colin Dudley pled guilty to the murder of Cassandra Cannell. The court sentenced him to 26 years in prison. To many, it felt like a hollow victory. Rob sat in the courtroom, a quiet storm of remorse behind his eyes. He still blamed himself for not taking his sister's call, for not being there when she needed him most. Mary wept silently. 26 years felt like an insult, a countdown to the day her daughter's killer could once again walk free. "He'll get to live his life," she later said. "My daughter doesn't get that chance." Cassandra had loved the thrill of horror stories, but the one that ended her life was not one she could have imagined. The shadows she once embraced for fun had become all too real. Her story, though tragic, is a reminder that the monsters we fear in fiction often pale in comparison to those that hide behind familiar faces. Justice was slow and far from perfect, but in the end, the truth came to light. Cassandra Cannell's voice may have been silenced, but her story was not forgotten. Her life, and the betrayal that ended it, left an indelible mark, and for her family that scar would never fade.